Long time ago, people of a small town sitting between thick woods and hills, foggy as the misunderstood moral, was revolving around an old forgotten theater called the Midnight Theater. It had once been the largest building in town, once housing laughter, music, and applause had once echoed through the hall. But now it was dark and still, unused and abandoned, which meant once a month it lit up beneath the gaze of the full moon. Those stories have it that on those very nights, the shadows of individuals performed plays inside the theater that would never come to light. Everyone, including the news channel crew, were too scared to get near the tree, but there was a little girl called Ellie who come close. The character had listened to stories from the Midnight Theater throughout her life and had developed this wonder about it. Ellie felt one evening that was the definite moment she had been bored for stories and needed to experience one of the shows at Midnight Theater. Gilhouse plausibly clutching a lantern, she left her house and tiptoed down the deserted streets until she was in front of the theater. Twin wooden doors, painted high in detail, stood high and majestic, and even when closed, appeared to draw breath and open wider at the slightest gust of wind. With that thought still in mind, Ellie took a deep breath, opened the doors, and walked in. The theater, indeed, was even grander than she had pictured, with gold-carved decorations on the walls, red velvet seats, and solid massive metal chandeliers suspended from the ceiling in the manner of stars that never twinkle. As she left the room, the door slammed shut, the sound of the door reverberating through the long corridor. Ellie crept down the aisle. She made sure to make no noise, for her slender shoes were on a thick carpeted floor. Then she got to the front. She could see the stage, but it was a dark stage, and the woman in the tuxedo was not there. Doubt crept into her mind. Had she imagined it all? However, it's worth noting that at one point, a glimmer was again expected on the stage, as if someone secretly lit a match. Each progressive light appeared as if they were created by a specter. As more lights were switched on, they glittered softly. The crowd shielded their eyes as light flickered around them, and faces emerged, their performers wearing historical clothing with white painted visages. Ellie just stood with her mouth ajar as the shadows prepared to start with their dance. One and a Half Work narrated the tragedy of a young actress who used to be adored by townspeople, but who was left to fade out on the theater's stage because of jealousy. That is why her restless spirit came back to this defiled place every month with her fellow performers to play the last tragic scene of their lives. I remember that Ellie was actually empathizing with the characters, their pain, the betrayal, and the tragedy. Staring at the screen intently, she failed to realize that an unknown figure was gradually approaching her until the figure was a few steps from her. She gasped as she saw the figure. It was the actress. The pain and supplication in her eyes, buried beneath the ghost like makeup, still lingered. The terrorist pointed to Ellie to come closer, a gesture that the actress followed immediately. Ellie sighed and changed her mind, but still had an urge to follow those shadows, as if she was an obedient follower of a master course. Eventually, she got up from her chair and walked on the stage. When she transitioned, the world changed. The theater was no longer empty. Chandeliers were twinkling. The seats were occupied by the spectators clapping loudly. He who had been a ghostly presence around her was now a man of the flesh, alive, and husband to her. With a kind of despair, Ellie cast a glance at her and found herself dressed exactly like the actress was. She had a sudden feel of discomfort. In layman terms, she had introduced herself physically into the play that portrayed the events of that fateful night. She performed throughout the scenes. Her actions were choreographed. However, she had no idea where the choreography came from or why she couldn't disobey it. In the end, which was nearing the final scene of a play performance, Ellie observed all her fellow performers change and glower at her with jealousy. She backed away, feeling the iron grip of fear around her throat, but there was nowhere to run. They were all around her, and she was in the center of a light and had to perform, all alone. Again, the audience was as it has been, dead, at least physically, the people as soulless, thoughtless apparitions, now just as still and rigid as before, gaping vacantly. Cy Worthwhile smashed Ellen Ely, with, waste, legal, and greeted 1015 weightless witness, wasted, waste. In the final moment, she was struck by a sharp, chilling realization. She was going, to become an eternal member of the cursed performance at Midnight Theater. The theater went dark. When the lights turned on again, she was already in her own dress, or whatever she was wearing in the real world, and she was back on the stage alone. All the spirit-like disposition that the theater possessed had disappeared, and there was no sound there. The girl fumbled through the aisle with her eyes wide open, panting, opened the doors, and ran until she could no longer see the theater. Yet she didn't draw back, and only when she regained the privacy of her room, she stayed awake, honing on to the piteous look of the glamour doll lips and the reverberations of the applauding audience. Until now, folks insist that the Midnight Theater glows on full moon, and anyone within the vicinity can barely catch the sounds of clapping. Midnight Theater glows on full moon, and anyone within the vicinity can barely catch the sounds of clapping. And if you dare to peep, you could even get to see a new face among them, a little girl with very wide, scared-looking eyes who dared to find out about the secret that is behind the theater and who was thus painted into the picture, as it were. Please like and subscribe for support.